My bestie recently divorced from her husband, and her life took a twisted turn I never expected. I want to pull her out of it, but my husband won't let me. My 40 female best friend, 38 female, is going through a divorce with her husband, 44 male. We'll call them Alice and Ken. My husband, 37 male, and I have been together for 10 years and have always been close with Ken and Alice. Alice and I have been friends since long before we met either of our partners. We met in college, sharing dorm rooms and countless late-night study sessions that turned into deep conversations and laughter. We saw each other through bad breakups, celebrated each other's achievements, and even traveled together before life got complicated with jobs and families. Alice was my maid of honor, and I was hers. Our bond has always been unbreakable. My husband and Ken have become good friends over the years too. They initially bonded over their shared love of sports and quickly found more common ground. Ken, a tradesman who works out of his metal shop on their property, and my husband, a tech guy who loves to tinker with gadgets, often spend hours in Ken's shop, sharing beers and swapping stories about work and life. They hang out just the two of them semi-frequently, enjoying activities that range from fishing trips to helping each other with home improvement projects. Alice has a daughter, a bright 12-year-old from Alice's previous relationship, who became a part of our extended family. Ken has been her dad since she was 4, and it was clear he adored her as his own. My husband and I have always treated her like a niece, often including her in our outings and holiday celebrations. About a month ago, Ken told Alice he wanted a divorce. When Alice told me, she was devastated, and I could see the pain in her eyes. She confessed that for the last 6 months, their marriage had been on rocky ground. According to her, the problem stemmed from Ken's issues with her job. 3 years ago, Alice accepted a promotion at her company, a big step up that came with significant responsibilities. This promotion required her to travel 3 to 4 months out of the year, and even when she wasn't on assignment, she worked a lot. Late nights, early mornings, weekends. It seemed like she was always on the clock. She's always been insanely ambitious and successful, climbing the corporate ladder with an impressive determination that I've admired for years. Ken, on the other hand, is a skilled tradesman. He works full-time out of his metal shop on their property. His work is demanding too, but in a different way. He stays busy with projects, clients, and managing his own business. Despite his hard work, Alice's income had surpassed his, although I wouldn't call her the breadwinner. They both contributed significantly to their household, but the dynamics had shifted. Alice told me that Ken had been increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction with her job. He felt neglected, like their relationship was taking a back seat to her career. He had asked her multiple times to either take a position that required less travel and responsibility, or find a new job altogether. She had always promised to consider it but had been putting it off, hoping he would eventually drop the subject. This ongoing conflict created a rift between them that widened over time. The situation reached a boiling point when Alice extended a business trip without consulting Ken. She had forgotten about a family vacation they had planned for when she got back. Her priorities seemed clear to Ken, and he felt like he was being pushed aside. When she returned home from the extended trip, she found that Ken had packed his belongings and moved most of his shop and tools into storage. He hadn't given her any indication that he was planning to leave, acting like everything was fine until that moment. She called me. When I answered the phone, Alice was crushed. She kept saying, "I didn't think he'd do it," over and over. The sadness she initially felt quickly turned to anger when Ken made it clear that there was no chance of getting back together. He had reached his limit, feeling that Alice had checked out of their relationship ever since she took the new position. He believed they no longer did anything as a family, that Alice didn't make time for them to talk when she traveled, and that she prioritized socializing with coworkers over him. Their sex life had dwindled to nothing, and every time he voiced his concerns, she blew him off. Ken's resentment had been building up for a long time, and the extended business trip was the last straw. He felt ignored, unloved, and unappreciated. Alice's ambition and success, traits that once drew them together, were now driving them apart. As Alice recounted all this to me, I could sense her frustration. She felt torn between her career, which she was passionate about, and her marriage, which was falling apart. She didn't want to choose between them, but it seemed like Ken had already made the choice for her. Everything became much worse after a particular incident that is hard to even type without cringing. Ken and Alice had been separated for about 3 weeks. Their daughter was bouncing back and forth between Ken's apartment and their old home, where Alice was staying. It was Ken's weekend with their daughter, and he typically brought her back on Sunday evenings. Well, Alice went on a bender and literally forgot what day it was. She was so drunk. She thought it was Saturday, but it was actually Sunday. Ken shows up with their daughter and walks in on a complete shit show. Alice had 2 younger men there. They were drunk and in the hot tub. They weren't in the act, but it was clear what was going on. The scene was chaotic. Empty bottles scattered around, clothes strewn haphazardly, and Alice, visibly intoxicated, was barely coherent. When Ken walked in, Alice started freaking out. She began calling Ken names and screaming that it wasn't Sunday yet. Her words were slurred, and her movements were unsteady. The younger men looked uncomfortable and started gathering their things to leave. Ken, trying to keep his composure, quickly escorted their daughter back to his truck so she didn't see the worst of it. He was furious but kept calm for their daughter's sake. Alice's outburst didn't stop. She kept yelling obscenities and accusations, completely oblivious to the actual day. Ken managed to get their daughter out of there without her witnessing too much, but the damage was done. The next day, Alice had no recollection of what had happened. She woke up with a hangover and a hazy memory of the night before. She had texted Ken horrible things while she was F up. The messages were vile, filled with deeply personal and hurtful comments. Ken showed them to my husband, who then showed them to me. I won't say word for word what they said. But it was really personal shit. The kind of things that cut deep and are hard to forget. Alice's drunken texts accused Ken of being a failure, of never loving her, and she even made derogatory remarks about his manhood. It was as if all her pent-up anger and frustration had been unleashed in a barrage of venomous words. Seeing those texts made my heart ache. This wasn't the Alice I knew. She was spiraling, and it was affecting everyone around her. The incident was a tipping point for Ken. He decided to go nuclear, determined to take her to the cleaners. He wanted the house, full custody of their daughter, and child support. He wasn't just angry, he was done. For Alice, the realization of what she had done hit hard. She tried to apologize, but the damage was irreparable. Ken was adamant that there was no going back. Their daughter, caught in the middle of this chaos, started preferring to stay with Ken, feeling more stable and secure with him. I know this isn't Alice. She's going through shit. She needs friends right now and I'm literally all she has. Alice's actions that night were a manifestation of her inner turmoil, a desperate cry for help masked by alcohol and poor decisions. It was a moment of weakness that had severe repercussions, rippling through the lives of everyone involved. Her own daughter would rather stay with Ken. I'm not going to cut my best friend out over this. The issue? My husband wants me to cut her out. He's said some really terrible things about her. He's called her a shitty mother. I know she loves her daughter. He's called her a self-absorbed f***ing b***. He says he doesn't want me getting sucked into her drama and behavior. Every time I insist that she'll turn it around and just needs help right now, he shuts it down, saying this is who she really is, and he doesn't know why I want to associate with people like her. I know a lot of this is just shit that Ken has told him, and he's defending his buddy. They've been close for years, and I get it. He's loyal to Ken. But it's different for me. Alice and I have a history that goes way back before either of us met our husbands. I'm not excusing her behavior, but I think it's unreasonable for him to want me to cut my best friend out of my life entirely. Alice has asked me to go out with her a few times recently. She's lonely and going through a really tough time. I went once without telling my husband because I knew what he'd say, and honestly, I just wanted to talk to her in person, to see if I could help her somehow. When I finally told him we had met up, he went ballistic. He accused me of hiding things from him, which, okay, I did, but only because I knew he wouldn't understand. He repeated that if I don't cut her out we'd have issues too. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand, and I'm stuck in the middle. On one side, there's my husband, who's been my rock for a decade, the person I share my life with. On the other side, there's Alice, my best friend, who's like a sister to me. Cutting her out feels like betraying a part of myself, a part of my past and everything we've been through. Update. This is not a happy update. Alice and I arranged to meet on Saturday morning. I plan to bring coffee and assist her with some tasks around her house before her business trip on Monday. My goal was to express our collective concern, her family's and mine, about her well-being and to let her know we all want her to be happy, though her recent behavior has been troubling. I hoped we could have a sincere conversation, that I'd reconnect with the friend I knew, that she'd agree to seek therapy, and that she'd start moving in a positive direction. None of that happened. She was combative from the second I showed up at her place, almost like she knew what my intentions were before I even said anything. Her defensive posture and curt tone were immediate red flags. When I told her I was worried about her, she brushed it off, insisting that she was fine and just blowing off steam, having some fun. She claimed that after all her hard work, she deserved to let loose, especially now that Ken had left her. Her defiance was palpable. She talked about how ungrateful Ken had been over the years, despite all her hard work and the financial support she provided. She listed everything she'd paid for and done for him, framing herself as the martyr in their relationship. It made me cringe to hear her speak this way because it was so out of character. She had always been the strong, independent one. But now, it felt like she was rewriting their history to fit her narrative. For the record, Ken is a hard-working guy who didn't need her money. He was the breadwinner when they first got together, supporting Alice as she climbed the corporate ladder. While it's true that she makes quite a bit more than him now, in no way was he dependent on her financially. They had always maintained a partnership based on mutual respect and shared responsibilities. Listening to her, it was clear that she was trying to rationalize her recent behavior, painting herself as the victim who had been taken for granted. But I knew better. Ken had supported her through thick and thin, standing by her side as she pursued her career ambitions. Her current perspective was skewed by the pain and anger of their separation. Alice's demeanor didn't change as I tried to reason with her. Every attempt I made to bring the conversation back to her well-being was met with more justifications for her actions. She was adamant that she was just having fun, and that she deserved it after everything she had been through. It was as if she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. Her combative attitude left me at a loss. Some of my friends pointed out it was likely that Alice was cheating on Ken. Reluctantly, I asked her about it. She got extremely defensive, her face flushing with a mix of anger and hurt. She gave me the whole, "I can't believe you'd even ask me that" attitude, her voice rising in indignation. Her reaction was immediate and intense, as if the very suggestion was an unforgivable betrayal on my part. I reminded her about the hot tub incident and how bad it looked. I painted the picture again. Ken walking in with their daughter while she was in the hot tub with two younger men, visibly intoxicated. The scene had scandal written all over it. But Alice blew it off, swearing she'd never cheated. She insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened, that it was just a night of harmless fun. When I pressed further and asked who the guys were, she admitted they were interns at her company. Her admission came with a nonchalant shrug, like it was no big deal. I could feel my stomach turn as I asked how old they were. Her response? They were legal. The way she said it made me shudder, a cold and dismissive tone that sounded more like something a dirty old man would say about younger women. It was gross and unsettling. Her flippant attitude didn't sit right with me. I could sense she was trying to downplay the whole situation, to brush it off as inconsequential. But the casualness with which she referred to these interns, combined with the scene Ken had walked in on, painted a troubling picture. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. Whether or not she was cheating before the breakup, I don't know. I don't really know anything about this woman anymore. The friend I had known for years, who was once reliable and grounded, now seemed like a stranger. Her actions, her words, and her entire demeanor were so far removed from the Alice I used to know. It was as if she had become someone else entirely, someone I couldn't recognize or understand. This whole ordeal had put me in a difficult position. I wanted to support her, to help her through this rough patch, but her behavior was making it increasingly hard. Here's where things took an unexpected turn. As we chatted, she was packing for her business trip. I asked her where she was going this time. She said Dallas. I didn't think anything of it. She's gone to Dallas for business dozens of times. But what struck me as odd was what she was packing. Long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, hiking boots. It was all fall attire and not what she'd be wearing in Dallas this time of year. The weather in Dallas was still warm, so her choice of clothing made no sense. I don't think I even saw her pack work clothes, which was even more puzzling given the purpose of her trip. But the weirdest thing? A random Seattle Mariners jersey. Alice doesn't follow baseball. She never has. Seeing that jersey among her things made my mind race with questions. Why would she need a baseball jersey for a business trip to Dallas? The more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. I wanted to ask her about it, to get to the bottom of this odd packing list, but I kept my questions to myself. I didn't want to seem intrusive or accusatory, especially given how defensive she had been lately. Despite my growing unease, I tried to stay positive. Alice seemed preoccupied with her packing, her movements hurried and almost frantic. Her daughter was coming over soon, adding to the sense of urgency in the room. I decided it was best to leave her to it, not wanting to add to her stress. We hugged before I left. I told her I loved her and that I wanted her to be happy. I emphasized that I hoped she would consider seeing a therapist when she got back from her trip. She looked at me with a mix of emotions and said, "I'll think about it." It was a small concession, but I clung to it, hoping it might lead to something positive. As I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The bizarre packing choices, the evasive answers, everything felt wrong. But I didn't push it. I wanted to trust that Alice knew what she was doing, even though my gut told me otherwise. When I got home, hubby and I sat down to talk about how things went with Alice. I told him about the clothes she was packing, long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, and hiking boots, and the random Seattle Mariners jersey. He thought it was odd too. We both found it strange, but other than it just being odd, We didn't think much of it at the time. But then, hubby went full internet detective. He was determined to figure out what was going on. After a bit of searching, he discovered something that made my heart sink. Guess who lives in Seattle and has a Facebook profile picture of himself at a Mariners game? Her daughter's biological father. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. When I checked the Mariners' schedule, they did have home games next week. I called Alice immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. When she picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Are you really going to Dallas?" I asked. She responded casually. "Yeah, why?" I took a deep breath and pressed on. "Are you sure you're not going to see her ex in Seattle?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, probably a full minute of silence that felt like an eternity. I could feel the tension mounting. "Alice, you better not lie to me, I'll find out," I warned her. Finally, she came clean. She admitted that she had gotten in contact with him right after Ken left her and that they'd been talking more and more. She claimed he was a different man now, that he had turned his life around. She launched into a spiel about how he had changed, how he was more responsible and stable now, how he wanted to be a part of his daughter's life again. But all I heard was blah blah blah. I was furious and heartbroken. This man had caused her so much pain in the past, and now she was letting him back into her life. After everything she had been through with Ken, the last thing she needed was to get involved with someone who had hurt her so deeply before. The fact that she had lied to me, that she had planned this whole trip under false pretenses, made it even worse. I didn't know what to say. I was filled with a mix of anger, disappointment, and fear for what this could mean for her and her daughter. I didn't talk about her baby daddy in the last post because it wasn't relevant. But just know this man is a piece of shit human being. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and kicked her out when she confronted him. He'd slap her around, call her terrible names, and degrade her in ways that no one should ever have to endure. This f***ing guy even had the audacity to say he wanted nothing to do with their child. When Alice finally reached out to me, desperate and broken, I didn't hesitate. I flew to Seattle, picked her up, and brought her home. She stayed with me for a bit, trying to piece her life back together. Those days were tough. Alice was a shell of herself, dealing with the trauma of abuse and the daunting task of raising a newborn alone. But Alice, being the resilient woman she is, slowly started to rebuild. She found strength in her daughter, who became her beacon of hope. Not long after moving in with me, she met Ken. He was a breath of fresh air, a kind, hard-working man who treated her with the respect and love she so desperately needed. Within a year of dating, they moved in together, and Ken embraced the role of a father to her daughter with open arms. He provided stability and affection, something Alice hadn't experienced in a long time. Ken was there for the milestones, her daughter's first steps, first words, and first day of school. He was the one who stayed up all night when she had a fever, who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories. In every sense that mattered, he was her father. Their little family seemed perfect, a stark contrast to the nightmare Alice had escaped. Thinking back to those days, it's painful to see how far things have fallen apart. Alice went from being in a loving, supportive relationship to the mess she's in now. The memory of what she went through with her baby daddy only makes her current choices more baffling and worrisome. She knows firsthand the kind of person he is, yet she's letting him back into her life. It's like watching her walk back into a burning building. The thought of her daughter potentially being exposed to that man again is unbearable. She deserves better. Alice deserves better. But she's so lost right now, so blinded by her pain and confusion, that she can't see it. It's like she's forgotten the horrors of her past and is willing to risk everything for a man who never deserved a second chance. All of this makes me fear for her even more. I told her that of all the shit she's pulled recently, this was by far the worst thing she could do. My voice was shaking with anger and disappointment as I laid it out for her. I couldn't believe she would ever speak to that man, after what he did to her, and how he treated her. She kept saying it was years ago, that he had changed, and that he wanted to meet his daughter one day. But that didn't matter to me. The scars he left, both physical and emotional, were still fresh in my mind, even if she chose to forget them. When she said he wanted to meet his daughter, something inside me snapped. I started screaming and yelling into the phone so loud I think I blew out my voice. "Are you out of your mind? After everything he did to you, to us, you're going to let him back into your life? Into your daughter's life?" I was beyond furious, my anger fueled by years of witnessing her pain and suffering because of that man. I told her I was done with her. I told her if she gets on that plane to Seattle, to not bother contacting me ever again. I hung up on her. She called back and texted once, but I ignored it. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I just sat on the couch crying all night while my husband held me. He didn't rub it in. He didn't give me an attitude. He just let me cry and told me he was sorry. Sorry that my best friend was making such destructive choices. Sorry that I was caught in the middle of this mess. Sorry that there was nothing he could do to fix it. I felt completely drained, emotionally and physically. The weight of my words and the finality of what I had said hung heavy in the air. This was the woman who had been my confidant, my rock, my sister in every way that mattered. And now, I was watching her walk down a path that I knew would lead to nothing but more heartache and devastation. The realization that I might have lost her for good was almost too much to bear. I couldn't understand how she could be so blind, so willing to rewrite history for a man who had only brought her pain. The memories of helping her rebuild her life, of watching her grow stronger and more independent, now seemed distant and futile. It was like all the progress she had made was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My husband's arms around me were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. Alice texted me this morning. She said she was sorry for lying to me but that she's a big girl now and can look after herself. Her words were a slap in the face, a dismissive wave of her hand as she brushed off my concerns and our history. It was as if everything we had been through together, all the support I had given her, meant nothing. Her stubborn pride was leading her down a dangerous path, and there was nothing more I could do to stop it. I asked her if she was still going to Seattle. There was a part of me that hoped she might change her mind, that she might see reason and reconsider. But her reply was a simple, unyielding, yes. That one word sealed the deal. I felt a mix of anger and sadness as I blocked her number. It was over. With a heavy heart, I told Ken everything. He was upset but not surprised. His eyes held a sadness that mirrored my own. He said he knew how close Alice and I were and that he was sorry I'd lost my friend. His empathy was comforting, a small solace in the midst of the turmoil. I told him I was sorry he'd lost his wife, that the woman he had loved and supported had drifted so far from him. You guys were right. I feel like a fucking idiot. Maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I feel betrayed. I had invested so much into our friendship, had stood by her side through thick and thin, only to watch her throw it all away. The sense of betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Alice's decision to reconnect with the man who had caused her so much pain was a betrayal not just of our friendship, but of herself and her daughter. She was undoing all the progress she had made, and it was heartbreaking to witness. I felt powerless, knowing that I had done everything I could and still failed to save her from herself. The memories of our friendship, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt tainted by the recent events. Every laugh, every shared secret, every moment of support and understanding was overshadowed by her betrayal. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes, no matter how much you care for someone, you can't save them from their own choices. As I sat there, processing the end of our friendship, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, disappointment, and a lingering sense of guilt. Had I done enough? Could I have done more? These questions haunted me, even though I knew the answers wouldn't change the outcome. Alice had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. I just lost a friend. A part of my life. My friend lost his wife. And worst, a kid just lost her mom. No matter how challenging life becomes, there will always be someone willing to extend a helping hand and guide you through your darkest times. Once you find such individuals, it is essential to cherish and maintain those relationships. Additionally, while work plays a vital role in our lives, it is crucial to balance professional responsibilities with family commitments. Your family serves as your sanctuary, a place of solace when external circumstances become turbulent. Failure to strike this balance may result in losing what you hold most dear. Prioritizing both your career and personal life is imperative for long-term fulfillment and stability. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.